The Federal Reserve in the United States is ready to raise rates on Wednesday, and Mike Zuzolo is going to comment the impact on U.S. farmers right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Mike, we are talking ahead of the Federal Reserve meeting today, and they are expected to raise the rates. Most people that will watch this video, most likely they will watch after the rates are confirmed. So, what do you think is going to happen in the agricultural sector?
Well, yeah, it's good to be with you again, Louise. Thanks for having me. I guess I feel like the Federal Reserve should be putting into the calculus or the formulation of their Federal Reserve monetary policy the idea that the banking industry, the financial services industry, is limping right now and could, see more banks go under depending upon what their individual stock prices do, because there are a lot of banks, mid-sized banks, decent sized banks that have a lot of their portfolio in US treasuries, and that portfolio and that portion, a lot of the cases we're hearing is underwater, and so it's called an unrealized loss. If they tried to get out of those positions today, they would take a big loss. And so they need a strong stock price in order to weather this storm. And we're seeing a market now where we've had another bank, two banks now, lose 20 to 25% of their value this week. And it really shook the pillars of the market. And it's what it's doing before the Federal Reserve speaks is convincing almost the trade that we're going into a recession and it's going to be right around the corner. It's going to be probably right after the summertime. So I would think the Federal Reserve would dial back their inflationary, kill the inflation beast, and really start to think about what it could do if they raised rates more than this month, and didn't come out and say, we're going to pause. We're going to see how the lay of the land is. We're going to see what the banking industry looks like in June, and then maybe we'll pick it back up again as far as raising rates. I hope that's what they do. If they don't, then what we've gotten used to this week, where both the dollar goes down and the crude oil goes down, could be a pattern that we continue to see. That's not going to be good, I don't think, for the commodities, especially in light of the IMF coming out this week and saying that Russia and China together are going to be about a little over 50% of the world growth for 2023. So those two countries are going to supposedly power most of the growth. And if you throw in Asia as a whole, it's upwards of 70% of the expected growth in the whole world economy is going to come from Asia. I think that number is going to be very difficult to meet if we have a US recession.
Yes, and at the same time, we have a record harvest of soybeans in Brazil. So that would put is already putting soybean prices lower.
Yeah, and I think this is really interesting and useful for the soybean hedger, for the producers out there in South America and the United States. You notice at the mercantile exchange on the futures price, the soybeans try and go up by themselves, but it's almost like they turn around, look over their shoulder, and say to corn and wheat, are you guys coming or not? And if the corn and wheat say, no, we're not coming, then the beans fall back. And we saw that once again this week. And I do think that private estimate that you're talking about that raised the Brazil production to 157.7 versus USDA's 154, I think, was their April number. I do think that caused the beans to turn over their shoulder once again, so to speak, and say, look, corn and wheat, we need your help here. Corn and wheat were nowhere to be found at that point, and we saw the beans fall right back. And we also saw the meal not lead this market. We saw the bean oil lead the market. If you don't have the meal underneath you, you probably don't have Argentina underneath you. And that's another, I think, weaker part of the soybean trade.
Yes, and a lot of the Brazilian beans are really hard to put in the market. Today, I saw a new number about the deficit of storage in Brazil, and it's over 60 million metric tons.
Yeah, and that's only going to become a bigger problem if we plant at a higher pace. And that's what I noticed on the planting progress up here in the States. Corn was not that much better than average, but the beans are really making some good progress. And that makes sense because producers have been a little bit more worried about corn seed in the ground under cold weather conditions than they were the beans. So if we continue on a fast planting pace for the soybeans up here, we will probably garner some more acreage from the northern plains, especially. And we've got to remember all those soft red wheat acres in the prime corn belt that we have this year. Those are probably going to be double cropped into beans with or without crop insurance protection because of how high the new crop bean price is. So I continue to see the beans as the weaker suit of cards, so to speak, when it comes to the supply demand fundamentals. It's the beans that have the best fundamentals from the macro standpoint. I think that's what, if I had to segregate and divide these markets up, you can see the corn and wheat get beat up the most because of the macro. Soybeans have the weaker micro side of the equation, I think.
Yes, and for corn, we are seeing decent planting progress in the United States, but already some delays for Brazil's suffering.
Yeah, and we're coming into a pretty big. I know we were delayed quite a bit, and you've helped me with that with your South American contacts about how much we're delayed and what kind of acreage base we're delayed by about 30, 40 days. But we are coming into the weather market now in Brazil's safrinha corn. And it's very pertinent to watch this very closely because some of the well-known private weather forecasters are forecasting a really nice rain for some key areas, both in northern center west Brazil and also down towards the southern southeastern Brazil. I don't see that quite yet on some of the other stuff that I follow. So these next two weeks to 14 days could be very, very crucial for developing that safrinha corn crop into a drought. And I think that's really critical, especially with us heading into June. By the time, 2 weeks from now, we'll be getting close to June. We'll be getting an understanding of what our temperatures here in the United States are going to be like. So watch it very carefully, especially with the May corn still trading almost $1.25 above the December corn. We still have a very tight cash market, and the basis shows that. The spreads show that as well.
Now, do you think the cattle producers can take advantage of this situation with lower prices on some meals?
I think they need to on their feed grains during this time period, at least through the summertime. And that's what I'm writing a special livestock report right now. And that's going to be a pretty significant part of it is we don't know whether what we just went through with the cattle market is a correction or whether it's a top in the market and a cycle high. I'm leaning toward it being a correction for a variety of reasons. But be that as it may, I still think the feed side of the equation what could hurt the cattleman, the cattle rancher the most. If we don't have $4.50 corn, like many feeders are thinking we will have in 6 months, if we don't have that, they could be in the red pretty quickly. And I think that's something to really look at.
And what's the outcome for you of this whole situation in the coming weeks?
Well, after the Federal Reserve and after the grain deal with Russia and Ukraine, those are the two things that have been driving this market, overlaying pretty much everything. And, we have supply demand fundamentals like today's ethanol numbers were very good. We've got the lowest ethanol stocks since December 4th of 2022 after today's report. Those things don't seem to matter as much, though, because we haven't gotten past the Federal Reserve and we haven't gotten past the grain deal. That lines us up for the WASDE May 12th crop report. And I think those are the top three things to be watching.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Luis.